It was 1994, years before destruction of the World Trade Center. The so-called Bojinka project, to blow up a dozen planes in the air, was for a time the most twisted terrorist operation ever uncovered. The name Bojinka was adopted by al-Qaeda mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and his nephew Ramzi Yousef, a nonsense word first thought to mean Big Bang in Serbo-Croatian. The plan, according to the 9/11 Commission report, was to detonate liquid explosives on U.S. commercial jumbo jets over a 2-day period. Terrorist operatives would board the planes in Asia and place bombs set to detonate over the Pacific en route to the United States. Mohammed's nephew even pulled off a successful test run on a Philippines airline flight headed for Tokyo.
Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of the Roads to 9/11 interview series with Adam Fitzgerald. Following on from our look at the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, we're going to pursue the mastermind of that attack, Ramzi Yousef, as he flees the United States to Pakistan and then the Philippines, and masterminds Operation Bojinka. Adam will describe how this hijacking plot came together, and then we'll discuss whether it was indeed the template for the later 9/11 attacks. We'll also compare this to Operation Norhtwoods, the US Air Force's plan to fake the shooting down of a passenger plane back in the 1960s to justify an invasion of Cuba. A lot of people who see 9/11 as being a conspiracy would think of Northwoods as being the template, and we'll see if that contradicts or rather complements the idea that Bojinka was. Now here's Adam picking up the narrative with Ramzi Yousef fleeing the United States.
Immediately after the World Trade Center bombing in 1993, Yousef fled to Pakistan and went into hiding for a couple of months. During the summer of that year, members of the Sahaba, which is a revivalist Sunni political movement in Pakistan, contacted Ramzi Yousef to assassinate Prime Minister, the first female Prime Minister in any Arab country, Benazir Bhutto. Yousef had planned to use a makeshift bomb to hide along the road where Bhutto lived. He was assisted by a former Afghan mujahideen, Abdul Hakim Murad, who was a close associate, and met Yousef while attending Afghan training camps and taught Murad how to make bombs. The plan failed when they scouted the area and found too much security and police covering the residence. The bomb that they had in place, which was located in the back of the vehicle, had prematurely detonated the car. This caused severe damage to Yousef's right eye and his hand, and he was rushed to a hospital outside Lahore, Pakistan. In June 1994, after Yousef recovered from his wounds, he went to Mahad, Iran, where the shrine of Aliyah Ridaya, the eighth Imam of Shia Muslims, is located. Yousef had constructed an impactful bomb, which was equivalent to 10 pounds of TNT. It was later reported that members of the Iraqi-backed People's Mujahideen of Iran, the MEK organization, which is a socialist Iranian movement, and allied with Saudi Arabia and Israel, had placed the bomb at the shrine at 2 p.m., in which it exploded at 2:26 p.m., while shrine members were celebrating Ashura, the holiest day of Shia Islam. The bomb detonated, caused 26 people to be killed and approximately 100 were injured. This would be Yousef's largest casualty rate and resoundingly successful terrorist act to date. According to terrorist analysts, Yousef was suspecting of having connections with the Mecca organization because of his Iraqi background. After the shrine bombing, Yousef had felt pretty confident and left for Singapore in the fall of 1994 with another Afghan Mujahideen fighter named Wali Khan Amin Shah, who fought against the Soviets in the early 1980s. The two men then obtained Philippine visas and made their way to Manila, Philippines in October 1994, where they met with Muhammad Jamal Khalifa, who was a former Afghan Mujahideen and a brother-in-law to Osama bin Laden. While it was here, it was asserted that Terry Nichols, who was involved with the Oklahoma bombing, because his wife was Filipino, he went and visited his wife's family. It was asserted here by an inside informant within the Abu Sayyaf organization that Terry Nichols, who was nicknamed the Farmer, had met with Ramzi Yousef and learned how to build a bomb out of urea nitrate, which is what was used in the Oklahoma City bombing. It was here that the plans for the largest terrorist operation in human history came to be born, which was called Operation Bojinka, or commonly known as the Bojinka plot. Bojinka is similar to the Russian word Bojinka, Bozhinka, which is a short term for God, mistakenly known as a Croatian term. The plan was operated under Ramzi Yousef, along with his uncle Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, or short KSM, who would later have ramifications in the years to come. Mohammed has residency in the Philippines for the year while dating numerous women along with Yousef at nightclubs. Incidentally, these women will become important because they will be so enamored with the two men that they open bank accounts in their name, while funding for the Bojinka plot came from Saudi and Pakistan clients, along with agents within numerous terrorist organizations such as Al-Qaeda, Abu Sayyaf, the Muslim Brotherhood, and contacts that Mohammed Jamal Khalifa had within his U.S. mosques in the United States, which are associated with major corporations as well. These accounts are associated over the next couple of months by Yousef and KSM. And it was during 8 months of 1994 that Yousef and KSM had begun testing for airport security. They would use eye contact solution bottles filled with nitroglycerin. And they would use a lot of jewelry to confuse security at airports because Ramzi Yousef would tape a metal rod underneath his arch of his foot to act as a detonator for these bombs. And so when they saw security, when they would go through the security detail and they would check with the hand wave, they would make them take off their the jewelry. But they had, at the time, they were not told to take off their shoes yet at this point. On December 8, 1994, Yousef would take residency at the Doña Josefa Apartments under the alias Await Haddad in Manila, in the Manila, Philippines. Later on, Abdul Hakim Murad would later live in the same apartment with Yousef. It was here that the Bojinka plot would be composed of three distinct events. One, the assassination of U.S. President Bill Clinton, which many areas of opportunity would quickly become distinguished due to the massive security detail. Clinton was to visit the Philippines on November 12, 1994, but it became too difficult to assassinate him. The alternative was then to have Pope John Paul II assassinated instead. And Yousef was to have dressed in a priest outfit and plant the bomb hidden in a suitcase or a large bag and place it along the Pope's route. The second point of this operation was to plant 11 timing mechanisms aboard United States-bound airliners, which had stopovers scattered throughout East Asia and Southeast Asia. The bombs would then be planted inside the life jackets underneath the seats. They would all then explode while advancing over the Pacific Ocean in 2 minutes apart from each other. And they would all explode and have the debris land into the Pacific Ocean where no proper investigation would be held. The approximate kill count Yousef assimilated was at least 5,000 people killed. The third point of the Bojinka plot was to hijack a plane and to have it piloted to crash into the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. Abdul Hakim Murad had been attending a series of flight schools in Dubai, the Arab Emirates, New York, and in North Carolina, and even in Texas. He would later reiterate this idea of crashing a plane into an American target to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, which is where KSM had gotten the idea for 9/11 and manipulated the Bojinka plot into the attacks of 2001, which I'll get into later when we talk about it. The Mark II, or as they were called, microbombs, which were Casio digital watches. Watches would act as timers, and the nitroglycerin would be inside the contact lenses and be used as explosive. The first test for the Bojinka plot was to place a bomb in a movie theater in the Manila, Philippines. The bomb worked. It didn't kill anyone, but that was not the point, as the plan was simply have the detonation successful. The next plan was to enter an airport undetected and place the timing mechanism on board a flight. Yousef himself would test this creation. On December 11, 1994, Yousef entered Manila International Airport and gained a boarding pass for Philippines Airlines Flight 434, which had a stopover to Cebu International, which had a final destination for Narita International Airport in Tokyo, Japan. Yousef had boarded the flight, which took off at 5:35 a.m. Yousef then entered the laboratory with his toiletry bag in hand and took off his shoes to get out the batteries, the wiring, the spark was hidden in the shield of his shoe. Yousef then modified the Casio digital watch, assembled the bomb, which set at 4 hours later from where he set the timer. When Yousef returned to his seat, he actually asked the flight attendant for permission to move to seat 26K, and was granted permission to use the notion that he wanted to have a better view outside. He tucked the device in the life vest pocket underneath the seat. When the airplane landed in Cebu, he departed the plane and caught a return flight back to Manila. The plane then took off its destination for Tokyo at 8:38 a.m. with 236 passengers on board. One of those passengers was Haruki Ikegami, a 24-year-old Japanese businessman. He would be placed at 26K, the seat where the bomb was at. And at 11:43 a.m., the device detonates and kills Ikegami instantly. However, the bomb was mistakenly placed just 2 seats in front of where the fuel tanks were built underneath. And the flight attendants tried to pull Ikegami's body out of the hole, saw that most of the lower half of his body below the waist was gone. Ikegami's body had to absorb most of the blast, the plane survived from being imploded. So the flight crew miraculously lands the plane, and the remaining souls on board managed to survive. Yousef immediately went back to the Yousef apartment and began preparing for the final stages of the Bojinka plot. And on the morning hours of January 6th, while preparing to make the bomb for the final leg of the plan, Murad had began mixing chemicals. This is one assertion. There's one assertion where he began mixing chemicals, spilled into the sink full of water, which caused an inexplicably bad reaction. The room began to fill up with this acrid, thin black smoke, which poured out of the room. There was another assertion that the Philippine National Police had infiltrated this group within the Bojinka plot, knew about the plot, and then somehow got into the room and planted an explosive device, which caused a small explosion in the room when Murad and Yousef had to flee. Whether you want to believe either assertion.
Okay, it might just be worth then just me asking about the kind of context in the Philippines, which Yousef has slotted into. It's not that they're like the only half dozen Islamist terrorists operating in the Philippines. There is an active Islamist separatist movement going on there, and questions about the state's infiltration of it, and then what the state was doing infiltrating it. Was it just keeping an eye on it, or was it using it to perpetuate terror in a kind of Gladio false flag style operation? So what would you say about the context in the Philippines at the time?
Well, I would say take it with a grain of salt, because the information that we all, the general consensus, the public, is aware of is of Murad's testimony, which you have to take with a grain of salt too, because he was actually tortured. So much like with KSM in 9/11, I would not dismiss it, but I wouldn't fully divulge all your eggs in one basket. So I would say take both scenarios and leave it where it is at.
It seems to me, Adam, that in contrast to when we were looking at the 93 bombing, I came away from that feeling like you could have a good sense of what went on there, and that essentially the right people ultimately went to jail for it, in terms of the blind sheikh, Omar Abdul Rahman, and the rest of them. Even if they got outside help, they were involved in the plot, and you could feel comfortable with that because there was Imad Salem, the working as the FBI informant, infiltrating the group. The operations were recorded. The base where the bomb was built was wiretapped, etc. So the men were caught confessing. Imad Salem was careful not to entrap them. So, and of course, all the evidence linking the rental truck to the bombers themselves. Now, talking about Ramzi Yousef, the whole thing feels like it's much more uncertain. Okay, like with every event of Ramzi Yousef after he leaves New York, you've got like 2 or 3 different versions of what might have happened. And it's what we know comes from testimony that may have been extracted from torture. It comes from laptops that may have been interfered with, etc. So does that seem accurate to you, that we're on shakier ground describing who these people are and what they were up to at this point in the story?
Yeah, that's absolutely feasible. In fact, I would think that's very much what would happen, especially when you have the intelligence services such as the CIA, the Pakistan ISI, Mossad, who do extensive investigations into these Islamic militant groups. And I think a lot of background after '93 with Ramzi Yousef is a lot of uncertainty, especially with Project Bojinka, because of the information that we're fed with the official account. The narrative is coming from Murad's testimony itself. And Murad's testimony, like I said before, comes from under great duress. He's actually tortured horribly. He's actually beaten tree logs. He's given sleep deprivation over the next course of the week. So much in the way of what the Islamist terrorist groups that were involved with 9/11, such as Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ramzi Yousef, Hambali, Edwin Isamuddin, these people, Ali Abdulaziz, all these people who endured even greater torture than, say, Abdul Hakim Murad, and for longer extended periods of time, months, even years. So we have to take what you say with an extreme grain of salt. And we have to also look at the other forms of information that come from external agencies as well, not within the U.S. coalition internal services. When it comes to Ramzi Yousef and Murad, I'll just explain in short order when they fled the premises and they watched the police and fire department investigate the matter. Yousef had left his laptop behind in the room. Now, whether you want to believe that the laptop was interfered with by the CIA or the Mossad or whatever agency, like I said, take a grain of salt. But he actually orders Murad remarkably to go back and retrieve the laptop. And incredibly, ludicrously, Murad did. And he made it halfway up the steps, and it was accosted right away by the Philippine National Police, who saw the room littered with bomb-making material, also Catholic outfits complete with crosses and Bibles. And Murad actually flees from the premises, but he falls down running away. He's actually captured, and Yousef actually sees this from a distance, and he manages to flee, seen unnoticed, and flies back to Pakistan. Meanwhile, the Philippine National Police harshly interrogates Hakim Murad for days, and it was broken by lead investigator Rodolfo Mendoza, who orders everybody to leave the room and gives Murad a hamburger. And it was just this gesture. Murad then began to have an open, more productive dialogue. And it was here that Murad began divulging information regarding the Bojinka plot and the idea of having planes hijacked in the United States and having them crash into selected targets. Murad mentioned that he had pilot training inside the United States, and 10 other operatives are being trained inside the U.S. And Mendoza was careful not to lose Murad's silence and began addressing Murad that his family back home in Pakistan should not be made to suffer for his actions. And Murad agrees and reiterates something which was kept total secrecy even to many of the operatives involved with the Bojinka plot. And that was a second wave in the operation have suicide hijackers involved. Mendoza later states in an interview that this is the formal training going on for suicide bombers. He said that there were other Middle Eastern pilots training in the United States, and he discussed the names and the flight training schools they went to. And he gives this information to the FBI, and the FBI ultimately states that they do nothing with it. Murad actually states this in an interview, which is then put on the Associated Press, which you could find on YouTube actually itself. Murad then states that the targets such as nuclear facilities, Pentagon, CIA, Langley, Sears Tower, along with the World Trade Center were like potential targets. And again, he says he reiterates the target potential for the FBI, and the FBI does not provide information provided to him from the interview with Murad in transcripts. Murad would then be brought to the United States. He later is convicted on 7 counts of conspiring and attempting to bomb 12 planes. He's actually serving his sentence at a maximum security prison in Marion, Illinois, where John Gotti once was housed. His testimony also was lead to the capture of Ramzi Yousef in a guest house in Islamabad, Pakistan. Along with the information provided by one Istaki Parker, who is an associate of Ramzi Yousef, and a militant was helping Ramzi Yousef plan for a future bombing of future planes. And he actually walked into a Pakistan ISI. He walked into an FBI guest house, and he actually reiterates the information. Meanwhile, there was always this saturation of wanted posters that came in the form of matchbooks that were dropped by the FBI in planes. There was a $2 million bounty for Yousef's arrest, and it had his picture, Ramzi Yousef's picture, on these matchbooks, and they would be placed all around Pakistan. And the FBI found out that Pakistan was one of the leading nations for cigarette smokers. This is the reason why they put it on these matchbooks. It's an ingenious idea. Yousef is actually captured by the Pakistan ISI and the U.S. Diplomatic and Security Services.
Is that the State Department's security?
Yeah, that's the State Department Security Services. And they placed Yousef under arrest, and they actually take a picture of him, and you can see this. You find on Google, YouTube, or Google Images. You can see Yousef. He's actually wearing a white T-shirt. His hair is messed up, and because one of the security services actually thought it'd be a great idea to take a picture of him right away, and he's actually in like a sleeping mode, almost like what they did with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
Oh, okay, that's the picture that's quite common of Ramzi Yousef. He does look very strange, let's say.
Right, because he's actually roused from sleep, and he was actually surprised when he got caught. And you can see like his one eye is swooped over. Yeah. So, but that's what they did with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and when they arrested him in Pakistan, they aroused him. They woke him up, and they actually made him shave his beard. They had a little mustache, like this little Hitler mustache, and he was actually roused from sleep as well. Yousef would actually be on a plane heading over Manhattan, and it was somewhere asserted here. And take this with a grain of salt, if you will. This is coming from the FBI, and the FBI is actually seated along the helicopter is being tried in New York. And they said something to the effect where Yousef, he looked down and he sees the World Trade Center, and the FBI has asserted that they're still standing. And Yousef said, and in certain terms, if I had enough money, it wouldn't be. And there's also another quote that says that not for long. So, like I say, take with a grain of salt because it's coming from one agent within the FBI on the plane. Meanwhile, Yousef would be tried in Manhattan and sentenced to life without parole. And he's serving his sentence in complete solitary confinement. And he's currently imprisoned at the Supermax ADX in Flores, Colorado. And that's where he is currently. So that's that for the Bojinka plot.
Okay, and the key person being then Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is not arrested at this time.
No, he actually flees the Philippines and goes into Afghanistan. This is where the operation for 9/11 happened.
Right. So I guess next time we're going to pick up on what Osama bin Laden has been up to this point in the 90s, and Ayman al-Zawahiri, and they meet up with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed at some point. But Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is seen as being the intellectual architect of the 9/11 plot. Then, right?
Correct.
And it's coming out of Bojinka.
That's correct. Actually, what we'll pick up next is where Osama bin Laden leaves Sudan. He goes to Afghanistan, and it's there he meets with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed relates to him the idea to use hijacked planes as missiles or as the targets themselves, crash them into the high-profile American targets.
Just again, regarding on how we know that, I've read an interview with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, or an abridged version of an interview. I think originally recorded by someone from Al Jazeera in 2002, prior to his capture, where he himself then talked about being the coordinator of the attacks, right? Which is obviously prior to his arrest, and everything from that moment on is more dubious because he's waterboarded like how many times? 180 times or something ridiculous.
It's 178.
Right, yeah. So obviously anything he says after his arrest is, well, make of that what you will.
Exactly right.
He did talk about being the architect of these attacks. The
only true unfettered information that we get that links him to 9/11 is exactly what the interview he holds with Ramzi bin Shabib to Yosri Fuda of Al Jazeera. And the only thing that links that is the audio, because he actually does take video of them. But Khalid Sheikh Mohammed asks for the video so they can blur their faces, so that it can't be caught by, of course, everyone in the world that's trying to look for them 9/11 attacks. However, according to Yosri Fuda, and in documentaries, however, it's in Arabic, there's a part of it that's in English, and I have it, but he has the audio of Ramzi bin Shabib. And the audio states that the idea for 9/11 did come from Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, which he has Ramzi bin Shabib be a part of, because he actually can't be a pilot because he can't get a visa inside the United States. So now he's the go-between the pilots and the contacts in Germany with Hayden Zamar, other external agencies as well, that funnels the money inside the United States. And he's not alone. You have other Saudi nationals that are involved that are funneling money from elsewhere as well. But besides the testimony of Sheikh Mohammed that came from torture, I would throw that all into the wind, because you can't use that information lawfully anyway in a court of law, because it's actually come from torture. So the only strand of linkage between Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 9/11 is from Yosri Fuda himself. And Yosri Fuda is actually an exceptional journalist. I hear from certain people that, oh, we really can't go by him. He's actually a really respectable journalist. Whether he lies about the whole thing, I would suggest that that's taken that foolishly, because the BBC and Al Jazeera actually are, well, Al Jazeera I would think is a reputable news agency, and you would have to say that they were all behind it, because he actually vouched for his travel to Pakistan.
Sure. I mean, it does feel strange that it comes down to like this one interview, because it's not just a legal technicality that you can't take anything he said under torture. It's like, just logically you can't take anything he said under torture, because you'd say anything, you know, if you were
right. I mean, I would tell you that I was involved with 9/11.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. I mean, look, at this point, if waterboarding actually worked, you wouldn't need to use it 170 times. I mean, 3 times this guy's ready to tell you his mother is involved. 170 times, what I believe happens is this: they actually waterboard him that many times so he can admit the crimes that he didn't participate in. And that's what I believe, because that list is long. You could look at all the operations that he's involved, and it's like ludicrous. He's involved with many bombing campaigns, organizations around the world, and yeah, I think that's feasible. That's what.
Sure, yeah. So Bojinka is often mentioned in the context of Condoleezza Rice and George Bush saying after the attacks, I don't think anyone could have envisioned hijacking airplanes and flying them into buildings.
That's right.
So
Yeah, because they had this information, which was reported to them by Rodolfo Mendoza, who gives the documents over to the FBI. The FBI, and he states publicly that the FBI did nothing with it, and they never followed up with Mendoza afterwards. So I don't believe the idea that the FBI or the State Department or the intelligence services overall had no idea that these militants were willing to use planes as weapons, but they knew as far back as 1995. So they knew, and it wasn't just the Bojinka plot in general. They knew that Islamic militants were to use the planes, especially in the cases of the late 1980s when the Abu Nidal organization were involved in hijacking planes, and they were bombing the terminals, causing terrorist acts within Israel, within France, within Italy, and that's where the godfather of true external unconventional methods came from, the Abu Nidal organization. So,
Right, yeah, and there was the Algerian groups that were looking to fly a plane into the Eiffel Tower.
that's correct.
I believe is the first attempt of that nature to put explosives on a plane, fill it full of fuel, and crash it into a tall building.
That's correct. That's the first initial point of using a plane as the weapon. In fact, that was the plane. It was called Air France Flight 8879, 8869. I could be wrong about 8879 or 8869. But Algerian Islamic group of Algeria stormed the plane. They were going to refuel the plane, have it crash into the Eiffel Tower itself. So and that was, we're talking about the early 1990s, the late 1980s, where they were going to use planes as the means of the weapon itself instead of having bombs in the plane itself, which was later into. I mean, the security service would be on the lookout for bombs because now with Ramzi Yousef. So instead, now the idea was to use the plane as the weapon itself.
Right.
But they knew this information. I mean, the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, the Defense Intelligence, you name it, everyone knew that these Islamic militants were going to use the planes as weapons. And that information was then reported to the State Department. So when you bring up Condoleezza Rice, he actually lied right in front of the 9/11 Commission, said, well, we had no idea we were going to use planes as weapons. They knew they had information in their hands as far back as 95. If you want to use that information, the FBI had the information from who? The Philippine National Police.
Okay.
Right there.
And as you mentioned last time, people who see 9/11 as an Islamic plot might look to Bojinka as the template, the thing it grew out of, okay?
Right.
People who see it as a US government conspiracy look to Operation Northwoods as being the thing it grew out of. Now, those two things aren't entirely mutually exclusive, right? In the with Northwoods, it was very much the US Air Force directing the operation and having a pretend passenger plane shot down and all the rest. So it was very much an operation that was coming from, it was not an operation being orchestrated from an outside source and allowed to happen. Okay, but it doesn't mean that, well, maybe they found it more convenient along the way to let an external group do the legwork, if you like, and set the whole thing up and then allow it to happen, as opposed to pretending to hijack planes themselves and to have shoot downs and these kind of things. Because exactly how the Air Force would have gotten away with Northwoods is it wasn't determined that they would have done, right? Because it was pretty elaborate in what they were attempting to do there.
Right. It was actually a construct strictly made by the State Department and neoconservatives involved. And what they wanted to do was use I think it was a plane full of American civilians and have it shot down or somehow exploded.
That they were going to fake the civilians, right? But I think they were going to shoot up some actual Cubans in Florida. But they were going to essentially
that's actually
fabricate
right. So that actually is right.
It's not clear they would have gotten away with doing that had they actually gone ahead of it, right? That no one would have figured out that actually these people don't exist and the whole thing is a farce. So what the point I'm getting at really is that we're describing it as, we're talking about the template of 9/11 being Northwoods, and these two different views of 9/11 was an Islamic plot, 9/11 was a CIA plot or a US military plot, right? But they're not mutually exclusive, right?
No, not at all. Because one's a military operation, the other one is an operation constructed by militants and actually manipulated by the intelligence services of Israel and the United States. And that's what I think 9/11 is. I think 9/11 was actually originally, like, I agree with Michael Collins Piper, who is a late author of Judas Goes, and a researcher into the events of 9/11 and the JFK assassination. And we both agree that I think that 9/11 itself was an Islamist plot, but then later caught wind by the intelligence services, the NSA, the CIA, and Mossad, and manipulated or added to it, where they had a little bit of physicality into it and then let it transpire. I think that's the most plausible scenario. Whereas Northwoods was strictly just a military Pentagon operation assisted by or constructed by as well with the neoconservative movement. So they're not mutually exclusive at all. And I think that's the problem with many truthers in the truth movement, is that they mistakenly believe that 9/11 is strictly a United States construction or an Israeli construction itself, but it's not. Actually, there's no evidence to suggest that whatsoever. So that's what I would suggest 9/11.
Okay, so we'll continue to examine over the coming episodes the kind of intelligence, quote unquote, failures that would allow such an event to happen. Well, first of all, we'll look at the embassy bombings and the bombing of the USS Cole right up until then, 9/11 itself. And then we'll probably question that kind of gray area that exists, that where is exactly the line between allow it to happen, make it happen, you know, with the plot itself. So that's, I think next time we'll pick up with what Osama bin Laden has been up to for the 90s so far, post the Afghan war, and the embassy bombings. I think that's the place to go.
Yes, yeah.
Great.
Embassy bombings would be nice.
Okay. Anything more on this topic, Adam?
Oh, that'd be it, Richard.
Great. Looking forward to next time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.